Hi, my name is Amedeo Beretta, and in this video we're going to see how to design a color key that we could use to light and render our animation to make it look more appealing. We're also going to launch our first basic render of the timeline. The panther animation comes from a course of mine that shows how to animate a creature walk by animating just a few parts of the body and reusing their animation in a way or another to complete the rest of the walk, with the idea that this way we will spare a lot of manual work. You can find the link in the description below, as well as the Limbic cache of the resulting animation, which you can use to follow this tutorial. In the previous episode we have seen how to import the animation and the materials into Unreal Engine, draw a thumbnail to establish framing and composition, build a jungle set using Quixel Megascan assets, apply gobo to our light and build some basic lighting. In fact, we were doing great, until Sun Tzu reminded us that we had no strategy. And he was right. We needed a color key that we could use as a reference in order to light our scene. So let's get started and move one frame closer to the final render. A color key is a very rough picture you can use to understand how the lighting will look like in your scene. It is a very efficient way of working because it will tell the artist essentially which kind of tools they need and how they need to orient the lights. And before even spending extensive time in 3D, you will know how your movie will look like. Very often color keys are painted over models, so that you don't have to come up with the shapes, but you only focus on the lighting. If you think of it, we can do the same in here. We can take a screenshot of this camera and work on it. So I'm going to hit F9 on my keyboard and the screenshot is saved. Now maybe I want to have some more data. Maybe I want to have also some information regarding the panther so that I don't have to paint over it. So I'm going to temporarily create a light pointed in the direction of the panther so that will give me the panther detail, and then take another snapshot. Then I'm going to point the light so that the eyes are very bright in there and the teeth are very bright. Again, take another snapshot. And then I'm going to create some sort of rim light on the edge of the panther there. And I'm going to take one more snapshot. So now I have my snapshots captured. I can go in and I can start painting. You don't need to be a fully fledged artist to flesh out the color key. In fact, you see, I have collected some references in here as to what I want. It would be cool to have maybe a dark background to begin with. The fog, I'm not sure I want to have the sky so bright in there, but I kind of like it at the end of the day. And also I have some more stylized sources to make me understand the general idea I want to get to. It seems to me that all the pictures are pointing to a dark foreground, a less dark middle ground, and a bit of a brighter background with fog, and possibly with the character with an outline of light detaching it from the background. So you see, I did do a little bit of research, although I didn't show that. I'm going to copy and paste all the snapshots into one so that I have all the information I need on the first snapshot. I'm going to save this thing before anything crashes. This is going to be my color key. And if I wanted some masks, I could even output some masks from this. For instance, if I go under the lit menu in Unreal, I can go under buffer visualization and grab the base color. It will give me, you see, flat colors. I can press F9 to store the snapshot. And this flat color hopefully should be easy to select in Photoshop. So maybe I can use them as a mask. So again, I'm going to copy and paste them there. They're going to be my mask, and now I can start working a little bit. First of all, I'm going to select Panther itself. You see how easy that is. And then I'm going to create a group, which I'm going to call Panther, and I'm going to give it that mask of the panther, so that now if I duplicate all of these layers, I can just dump them into the panther group. And if I color correct the content of the group, you see that I'm color correcting only the panther itself, which is really handy. You see that the panther group is not containing the teeth, however, so I also want to select the teeth in there. As I said, it does not have to be super precise. That's going to be my mask in there. Cool, nice. So now that I have my mask, I can maybe keep the frame that I like the most as a starting frame. So now I can grab what used to be my rim light in there and just bring it over the panther. And you see that now the panther comes out of the frame a little bit more, but that's a bit too strong. So I'm going to just reduce the opacity so that the panther will be indeed pretty dark, but it will be still a rim light defining its main shape. In fact, I can even put a mask on the rim light layer and just darken out the areas that I want to keep dark. So that now you see I have a little bit of a rim light in there. When I was adjusting the mask of the panther there, I did a little bit of a mess up because you see that it is not anymore covering just the panther itself. It also is selecting a bit of the background. That's not exactly what I want. So I'm going to reselect it real quick. You see, that's the mask. That's not what I want. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to update the mask. There you go. So now we have our panther and we have a rim light and we can control the rim light a little bit better. You see, that's not bad at all. Then what else? There is a little bit of a fill light in here. I have to be honest, this shader is way too reflective for what we are doing in here. So this is kind of a fill light. It fills up the dark areas of the panther. So again, I can make a mask out of it and then using a brush can bring out the areas you see that I maybe want to have a little bit more visible, but that's maybe too much. There you go. I can just paint a little bit of a fill light in there, not too much because I don't want it to be too bright. Now I have a panther that instead of being pitch black is a little bit more visible while still being pretty dark. I can lower the opacity of the fill and I can lower the opacity of the rim if that's too much at any given stage. That's cool. It would be nice if the eyes were popping out a little bit from the panther itself. So I'm going to again grab the eyes and the teeth as well. So I'm going to adjust the selection real quick. As I said, it's not very important that we make it super precise, although this is maybe a little bit less precise than I wanted. There you go. Maybe I can just copy and paste the selection and use this as a color for now. And there you go. That starts to look like something. Maybe the teeth are a little bit too bright, so I'm going to make a mask in there and just darken the teeth so that they're not so prominent. For the eyes instead, I'm going to put the eyes on a different layer and into their own group. This way, if I set the group blending mode from pass-through to normal, I can start playing with the hue and saturation through adjustment layers and with exposure. And I can start check if maybe making the eyes a little bit brighter. And I think that from the distance, this is definitely starting to look cooler. It starts to look like an illustration and I quite like the direction where this is going. It would be cool maybe if there was a little bit more brighter patches in the background as well. So I'm going to check if in the background we can maybe use this layer 1 and mask it. And maybe on the mask we could use one of the gobos that I have in my pure ref. It's really useful to have references ready at hand. So we'll try this one. I'm not very sure. We'll copy it, go back into Photoshop, go into the mask. This is going to be my mask there, which I'm going to probably scale up a little bit because otherwise the leaves will look a little bit too small. And this is not really working. Let's see what else we have there. That's too bright. This is okay. This is too bright. So I need this layer. So if I move the layer with the brighter background in front, I'm going to call this thing bright BG so that I know what it is. I'm going to create a mask, go into the mask itself, paste the gobo in there. Actually, now that I think of it, the gobo portfolio needs to be smaller. I'm going to duplicate it a few times so that I can start create a little bit of variety in there. And I'm going to check how it looks like. Okay, so this is getting there. I know this is not very promising, but I think it's getting there. I'm going to blur the gobbo. There you go. Then I'm going to manually edit the mask a little bit to have maybe a bit of darker background there. Maybe a darker middle ground as well. A little bit less contrast in the background so that it doesn't interfere with the panther silhouette that much. It's a bit flatter. And maybe in the area where the panther is walking, I'm going to add a little bit more light, and in the background I'm going to add a little bit of darkness here and there and make the patches maybe a little bit bigger at times. Something like that maybe will work. I have the feeling that this area in the foreground really needs to be a little bit darker. Let's see. This is way too dark. Now I'm going to check my references to see if there's anything that tells me anything else. I don't really have very good references in here. My research is a bit superficial in here, so maybe I will try to progressively brighten up foreground and then maybe try and add a little bit of floor variations there so that it will be clear it's not just an even floor and there are indeed some gobo effects even on the floor there. Something like this will work. Now I have to say that looks a little bit more like an illustration. I kind of like it again. It's still too bright in the background, so we probably have to do something about that. Let's save. And if I go and check my base color layer, maybe I can select the background, the sky itself, so that I can control it a little bit easier. I don't really need this part. There you go. And that's going to be, maybe I can put it here. And for now, I'm just going to fill it up with white as a mask. There you go. So that's my background there. And I can use this as a mask to an adjustment layer for the background. I can just grab a hue and saturation maybe. And you see this way I can control the background a little bit better. I don't really need this dude. That's a bit too desaturated. I can try and make it a little bit on the bluish side this way. And I can probably blur the mask a little bit because it's a bit too harsh now. There you go. So that we won't notice it too much that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think I also can go into the bright background, this guy here, and I can try and darken it a little bit. So first of all, I will try a general carpet bombing lower exposure thing so that I can try and regulate the whole environment. But this, you see, is not really looking great. A gradient you see as a mask to just reduce the amount of light that there is in the environment there. I'm still not very happy. Let's see if I make it a little bit more bluish, because I am thinking of the references in here, which this is a bit greenish to be honest, but I kind of liked the bluish aspect I had in here. So maybe I can try find that blue tint and brighten this up a little bit. And then go into my layers and just reduce the opacity of this adjustment layer. So there you go. So that's tinting everything a little bit more on the bluish side. I just don't want maybe the foreground to be tinted like the rest. So again, I'm using a gradient to mask that out. And by the way, that has the effect of creating some sort of fog layer in the background. And then maybe with the exposure, I can go onto the layer and try and see what happens if I bring back a little bit more of the shapes of the background, just to make the bright spots a little bit brighter and bring out a little bit of the volume there so that the background doesn't become entirely flat. There you go, something like this might work. Now maybe the background could be a little bit brighter, and maybe I could make the panther a little bit darker through another exposure layer so that it stands out a little bit better. Maybe I can do an artificial rim light myself through another exposure on the panther. I am going to push up the panther exposure, and then I also want to color it, so I could use a hue and saturation again, colorize it to the side. Maybe I want the rim light to be kind of bluish like the background. There you go, something like this probably will work. And then I'm going to put both of the adjustment layers into a group. I'm going to mask that group. This group is going to be my additional rim light. I'm just going to paint a white outline where the rim light is going to be on my tiger. I'm going to bring out a little bit more of the volumes there, because the rim light we had earlier on was okay, but it wasn't colored to begin with. It was a bit soft. I want something a little bit more determined there, something a little bit clearer so that I can paint the volume a little bit better. In practice, what I'm doing here is just painting on the left-hand side of the screen. That is the right-hand side of the panther. That should give me a line of light that is going to detach the panther a little bit better from the background, hopefully. There you go. So if I do the before and after comparison, this is before and this is after. So now the panther sticks out a little bit better from the background, which is still a bit too dark. I think I would like to have some shadow rays, some volumetric shadows coming through the background, because the background is a bit too bright, at times a bit too dark, maybe like in the foreground. So I maybe want to create a little bit of canopy of the trees, even in terms of what happens here behind the panther. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to grab another gobo, maybe this one from my PureRef collection there. I'm going to make this thing a little bit bigger. And the idea is that I will use this one to create the sort of volumetric shadows that I wanted. Let's see if that works. I'm going to first of all blur it. Then I'm going to set it to multiply so that you see when we have the dark leaves, they're going to show up, and when there was white, we're not going to show anything. Then I'm going to go into the blur tool set again, go into radial blur, and I'm going to set this thing to zoom. I'm going to bring the pivot up there to the top left. I don't know, I will try 63 as an amount. I'm going to wait a little bit. And this way we should get There you go, some god rays in there. I think I blurred it a little bit too much as a first pass. It should probably be a little bit clearer. So I'm going to go back. To be fair, I blurred it and blur it a little bit less, something like this. And then I'm going to try again. Maybe I'm going to convert it for smart filters so that I should be able to control the zoom blur afterwards. Let's see. I'm going to create again radial blur. Let's see if that's a thing. The problem is that the rays are a little bit too small. Oh, there you go. There's something there. This looks about fine. In fact, probably I can just merge this mod filter there and already have a look at how these rays are working. Well, that could work. That could be a little bit wider. It could probably be a little bit brighter behind the panther itself. There you go, and that's going to give me a little bit of texture even in the environment, and I can maybe create a mask so that again these guys will be less visible here in the background and away from the origin, so that we don't smudge everything with god rays, and so that we keep the panther silhouette a little bit more visible there against the background. There you go, that could work maybe. I find it a good idea in general to convert everything to black and white through an adjustment layer. That gives you a very good indication of the tonal values, and you will see if anything is too bright or too dark. That makes me think that maybe I can push up the brightness of the background a little bit. So I'm going to go levels. Actually, it's not the brightness, but the black point. There you go. I'm going to push up black point of the background a little bit in there so that the panther will really be the darkest element in the scene, hopefully. I'm going to make a mask on the floor so that the floor stays a little bit darker there. This is going to look okay, probably. Now let's remove the black and white. There you go. And now you see that we have the panther a little bit more visible again. Similarly, you could duplicate these levels, bring them into the panther group and use the levels this time around to darken the panther a little bit. So this way you create even a little bit more contrast between the panther and the background. You see it stands out a little bit more. The result is that you tend to flatten the fill light in here, but if you're going for something which is not super realistic, this might as well work. Then ideally we would want something in the foreground to create some sort of foreground element that can be blurry, but maybe we're going to do that straight in 3D. It kind of works, I think, already. There is a little bit of a problem, I think, in the background. The background is quite yellowish, while the rim light is kind of bluish there. So maybe I want to try with a hue and saturation layer and just try and see if I can make the background a little bit bluish. And I think something like this could work so that the rim light and the background will be more in line with the same tone. And then similarly, maybe I want the sky to be a little bit brighter in the background and a little bit bluish. Also, as a last minute addition to the scene, I created a group with an exposure inside just to brighten up the background. I placed it just above the background just to increase the contrast between the foreground and the background. Because my concern was that if I look at the panther here, with this new brighter background, I get a nice and clean silhouette there. But if I disable it, the panther melts a lot more into the background and I don't like it too much. So I'm going for something that is not strictly speaking realistic. It is a little bit more stylized as lighting, but this should give me some sort of vague idea of where we're going. This is our strategy. I'm going to save this thing and I'm going to make a snapshot of it and add it to my PureRef pictures there. So this is my picture. Nice. I have a plan, or sort of. And with this plan in mind, we can go into Unreal and put it into action. However, since at this stage we are talking about matching our lighting to a color key, I think a render test would be in order here, because I want to make sure that the tool is actually capable of rendering stuff. So let's see how to render out our sequence. Also, one of the things that is a little bit troubling to me is that in the sequencer, the image looks a lot brighter than in the viewport there. So I start to sniff there may be a problem in the way we are seeing colors in the viewport. So I wonder, what will the render look like? And to solve this doubt, we are going to go under Window, Cinematics, and Movie Render Queue. And in here, we are going to start a render job. We have our sequencer in here with shots, and there's one shot in there only. So we're going to click on the plus render in the movie render queue, and we're going to render out the sequence master. That's our sequence in there. If you click on unsaved config just under settings, you can access the settings for this render job. And as it stands, we are rendering out in JPEG with the deferred render system, which is the default one in Unreal. And if you go under output, you can specify where Unreal is going to store your files. As a first test, I just want to render with the default settings just to see what comes out of it. So I'm going to close the settings window. I'm going to click under the output column, and that should open the folder where the renders are going to be stored. And I'm going to hit render local. Unreal will open up the render window, and in there I'm going to see what's going to come out in terms of frames. Now, I don't know what you think of this, but this doesn't look at all like what we have in the viewport there. So now we know that we might have a problem rendering this out because the render does not look like the viewport. So in the next video, we're going to see how to make sure that what we see in the viewport, what we see in the camera, and what we see in the render will match in terms of color and lighting. And that's it for today. I hope you have found this video useful, and if that's the case, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Have fun!